I thought I had everything figured out. 5 years of marriage, a decent apartment in the city, a stable job as a software engineer. It all seemed perfect. Every morning I woke up early to make Miranda's coffee exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, served in her favorite ceramic mug. I'd watch her sketch fashion designs at our kitchen table, her blonde hair falling over her shoulder, completely absorbed in her work. "Morning," she'd say without looking up. "Morning." That was usually the extent of our morning conversations. I told myself it was fine. She was focused on her dreams, and I was there to support them. I paid for everything: rent, utilities, her studio space downtown, fabric costs, even her daily designer coffee runs that cost more than my lunch. This was what love looked like, I convinced myself. Sacrifice, support, devotion. But that Thursday evening, everything shattered. I came home early, excited because I'd just received a bonus at work. I was planning to surprise Miranda with dinner at her favorite Italian restaurant, the expensive one she always mentioned, but said we couldn't afford. I opened the apartment door quietly, wanting to surprise her. The apartment was too quiet. Then I heard it, her laugh, breathy and intimate, coming from our bedroom, mixed with a man's low chuckle that I recognized immediately. My chest tightened. My best friend Daniel's voice. I stood frozen in the hallway, my briefcase slipping from my hand and hitting the floor with a soft thud. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk out, preserve the illusion just a little longer. But my feet carried me forward. I pushed open the bedroom door. Miranda and Daniel were tangled in sheets I'd washed last weekend, their clothes scattered across the floor. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in each other. Then Miranda's eyes met mine. For a split second, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not guilt, but annoyance. Annoyance that I'd interrupted. "Ethan, this isn't what it looks like," she said, pulling the sheet around herself. I almost laughed at the cliché. Daniel, my friend since college, the guy who'd been best man at our wedding, sat up slowly. He didn't even bother to look sorry. "Man, he started. I held up my hand. I couldn't hear his voice right now. My whole body felt numb, like I was watching this happen to someone else on television. I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Miranda glanced at Daniel, then back at me. I repeated, my voice cracking. 6 months, Daniel said quietly. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of me working overtime to pay for her studio while she was probably meeting him there. Half a year of believing her when she said she was networking or meeting suppliers late into the evening. "Ethan, wait!" Miranda called out, but I was already backing out of the room, my hands shaking. I grabbed my keys and wallet from the entry table, not thinking, just moving. I had to get out. The apartment suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind replaying every moment I'd ignored. The late nights she came home smelling of cologne that wasn't mine. The way she'd stopped asking about my day months ago. How Daniel had been around more often lately, always with some excuse about business opportunities in the city. I'd been so blind. Around midnight, I ended up at my father's house in the suburbs. Robert Carter opened the door in his bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without questions. "She cheated," I said, the words feeling unreal coming out of my mouth. My father's jaw tightened. He'd never particularly liked Miranda, though he'd been too polite to say so directly. He asked. I sank onto his couch, my head in my hands. "I don't know, Dad." I didn't go home that night, or the next. I stayed at my father's place, ignoring the dozens of calls and texts from Miranda. My phone buzzed constantly until I finally turned it off. But by Saturday afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I turned it back on and found 43 missed calls and 37 text messages. "Ethan, please, we need to talk. You're being irrational. I can explain everything. At least let me speak." I texted back one line, Coffee shop on Market Street, 2 p.m. She showed up 15 minutes late, wearing the designer jacket I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked perfect. Hairstyled, makeup flawless, like this was just another inconvenient meeting she had to attend. "I'm glad you agreed to see me," she said, sitting down across from me. I said, my voice flat. She sighed like I was being difficult. "Ethan, you're being dramatic," I interrupted. "That's not a mistake, that's a choice." Her expression hardened. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her, this woman I'd devoted 5 years of my life to, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. I said slowly, "I worked 12-hour days to support your dream. I paid for everything, your studio, your materials, your lifestyle." Miranda leaned back, crossing her arms. "You don't understand. Daniel gets me. He understands ambition, success. He's building an empire. You're just ordinary." The words hung between us in the coffee shop air. Around us, people chatted and laughed, completely unaware that my world was ending at this small corner table. "I want a divorce," I said. Her eyes widened slightly. "Ethan, don't be hasty. We can work through this. Couples therapy, maybe." "There's no we anymore," I said, standing up. "I'll have papers drawn up. You can keep whatever you want from the apartment." For the first time, I saw something like fear flash across her face. "What about my studio? The lease is in your name. The equipment loans are co-signed." "Figure it out," I said, and walked away. Behind me, I heard her calling my name, her voice sharp with panic, but I kept walking. For the first time in 5 years, I was putting myself first. The following Monday, I walked into work feeling like a ghost. I'd barely slept all weekend, surviving on coffee and my father's well-intentioned but terrible attempts at comfort food. Sarah Mitchell, one of my junior colleagues, noticed immediately during our morning stand-up meeting. She asked, "I must have looked worse than I thought." "Just some personal stuff," I said, trying to smile. It didn't work. Later that day, Sarah knocked on my office door with 2 coffees. Something about her genuine concern broke through my numbness. I found myself telling her everything: Miranda, Daniel, the betrayal, the divorce I was planning. Sarah listened without judgment, her expression sympathetic. "I'm so sorry," she said when I finished. It was a simple statement, but it meant more than she knew. That afternoon, I called Grace Chen, a divorce attorney my father had recommended. Her office was downtown, sleek and professional. Grace herself was in her mid-30s, sharp-eyed and efficient. "I've seen cases like this before," she said during our consultation, reviewing the notes I'd given her. "I don't want to take anything from her," I said. Grace looked at me seriously over her glasses. "Ethan, I understand you're hurt, but don't let guilt make you stupid. She benefited from your work for 5 years." I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so focused on escaping that I hadn't considered the practical reality: the studio I paid for, the credit cards in my name she'd maxed out, the car I'd co-signed for. I asked, "Can we?" Grace smiled grimly. "If you're asking if we can sue him for alienation of affection, unfortunately, the state doesn't recognize that. But," she leaned forward, "I can make sure the divorce proceedings are very thorough. Bank records, credit card statements, phone records, everything." I liked the way she thought. "Do it," I said. And as I left her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in days, a tiny spark of control. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was taking action. 2 weeks into the divorce proceedings, Grace called me into her office with an urgent tone. "Ethan, sit down." She spread documents across her desk: bank records, credit card statements, phone records. What she'd discovered was worse than I'd imagined. "This is fraud," Grace said, pointing to a series of transactions. The credit card I'd given Miranda for emergencies had been maxed out with charges at expensive hotels, restaurants, luxury boutiques. Dates with Daniel, I realized, my stomach turning, but that wasn't all. "She took out a personal loan in your name," Grace continued. $15,000. I stared at the documents, numb. Grace pulled up bank statements, She's been funneling money from your joint account into a separate account. Daniel helped her set it up. Best guess? To drain you dry and run off together. You were her safety net, Ethan. I sat in her office, staring at the evidence of Miranda's betrayal laid out in black and white. Part of me felt vindicated. I wasn't crazy for feeling used, but mostly, I just felt tired. We can pursue criminal charges, Grace said. This is identity theft, fraud. Let's focus on the divorce first, I said. Grace smiled. When Miranda received the detailed filing, she showed up at my father's house unannounced. I was staying there temporarily, trying to figure out my next move. The doorbell rang around 8 p.m. Ethan, please, you have to listen to me, she said when I opened the door. She looked different. Her hair wasn't styled, her makeup was minimal, her clothes ordinary. The designer jacket was gone. There's nothing to say, Miranda, I replied, starting to close the door. She put her hand against it. I said, genuinely shocked, I'm not the one who cheated. I'm not the one who committed fraud. But the studio, she said, her voice breaking. If you pull the funding, I'll lose everything. Jessica already backed out of our partnership when she heard about the divorce. Looking at her, I realized something profound. I felt nothing. No anger, no love, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness where she used to be. You made your choices, Miranda, I said quietly. Now you get to live with them. Daniel promised he'd help me, she said, more to herself than to me. I almost felt sorry for her then. Almost. Good luck with that, I said, and closed the door. Through the wood, I heard her crying, but I didn't open it again. Whatever happened to her now wasn't my responsibility anymore. For 5 years, I'd made her my entire world. Now, she was just a chapter I was closing. A month after I filed for divorce, I took Grace's suggestion and hired Tom Reynolds, a private investigator she'd worked with before. We met at a diner near his office. I want to know everything, I told him. Tom was in his mid-40s, professional and thorough. It'll take about 2 weeks, he said. He wasn't careful. Within 10 days, Tom presented me with a file that changed everything. Daniel Shaw isn't the successful entrepreneur he pretends to be, Tom said, sliding documents across the table. His empire is built on debt, shady business deals, and investor money he's been mismanaging. I flipped through the documents, stunned. There's more, Tom continued. His previous marriage ended because he cheated on his wife, with her sister. I asked. Daniel made her specific promises. Tom pulled out bank statements. But according to his financial records, he's drowning. He can't even make his own rent. He's been borrowing money from friends, maxing out credit cards. I sat back processing this. Miranda had blown up our marriage for a complete fantasy. Daniel had never intended to follow through on any of his promises. He was using her just like she'd used me. There's one more thing, Tom said, pulling out his phone. He showed me screenshots. He'd been playing all of us. Tom asked. I thought about it. The old me would have felt guilty, would have warned Miranda, would have tried to protect her from more pain. But the old me had died in that bedroom doorway. Send everything to Miranda's phone, I said, and to this Victoria woman. Tom nodded approvingly. Scorched earth. 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. You bastard, Daniel hissed when I picked up. You sent those messages. I laughed, actually laughed. I'm not trying to ruin anything, Daniel. I'm just making sure everyone sees the truth. Miranda is devastated, he said. She's been calling me nonstop, crying, threatening to expose me to my investors. Not my problem, I interrupted. You two deserve each other. Actually, scratch that. We were friends, Daniel said, his voice dropping. Brothers, man. Since college. I felt anger then, pure and clean, burning through the numbness. You threw it away the moment you slept with my wife, I said. Don't you dare try to make me the villain in your story. Everything that's happening to you right now, you earned it. "You'll regret this," he threatened. "I have connections, resources." "No," I said calmly. "You really don't. I've seen your financials, remember? You're broke, under investigation, and losing everything." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but it was from adrenaline, not fear. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. Not because I'd sought revenge, but because I'd simply stepped back and let the truth do its work. Over the next few weeks, I watched Miranda and Daniel's lives crumble from a distance. Sarah kept me updated. Apparently, news of the affair and Daniel's fraud had spread through our social circles like wildfire. Miranda's studio closed, Sarah told me one afternoon at work. The SEC investigation went public. His company declared bankruptcy yesterday. Miranda's fashion business collapsed completely. Without my financial support and with Daniel unable to help, she couldn't pay for anything. Her supplies got repossessed, her website went dark, her few clients disappeared. Jessica, her former business partner, was now publicly bad-mouthing her on social media, claiming Miranda had tried to steal designs and clients. Daniel had it worse. The SEC investigation went public. His investors pulled out. His company collapsed. His luxury apartment was foreclosed on, his car repossessed, his assets frozen. Victoria, the girlfriend he'd been seeing, dumped him spectacularly. She posted screenshots of their entire conversation on social media, exposing every lie he'd told. His reputation in the business community was destroyed. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved back in with his parents in New Jersey, working retail to make ends meet. One evening, my father and I were having dinner at his place when he asked, "Do you feel better?" I thought about it carefully. "I don't feel happy about their pain," I said slowly. "But I don't feel guilty either. They made their choices." My father nodded approvingly. "That's wisdom, son. Revenge would have meant you were still letting them control your life. This?" He was right. I realized I'd stopped checking for updates about them. I didn't care anymore where Miranda was living or what Daniel was doing. They'd become irrelevant to my life. At work, things were looking up. My boss, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office one afternoon. "Ethan, I want to talk to you about a promotion," he said. I was stunned. "You've been our most reliable engineer for years," he said. "And honestly, ever since your personal situation began, you've somehow become even better." After I left his office, Sarah found me in the hallway. "Did I just hear right?" I nodded, still processing. "Well deserved," she said, smiling warmly. "Want to grab dinner to celebrate?" "As friends," she added quickly. I looked at her, really looked at her. She'd been kind when I needed it, supportive without being pushy, genuine in a way I'd forgotten people could be. "Yeah," I said. That evening, as I packed up my desk, my phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Ethan, it's Miranda. Please, I need to talk to you. I have no one else. Please." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. I had nothing left to say to her. That chapter was closed. 3 months after I'd walked out of that bedroom, the divorce was finalized. I met Grace at her office to sign the final papers. "She got nothing," Grace said, sliding the documents across her desk. "Except her personal belongings and the debt she accumulated in her own name. The fraudulent loans have been legally separated from you." "She actually tried to argue for spousal support," Grace continued, shaking her head. "Her lawyer brought up her sacrificed career opportunities to support your dreams." I signed the papers, my hand steady. Grace asked. "Free," I said, and meant it. That evening, I met Sarah for dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. Over the past few months, our friendship had deepened naturally. She was easy to talk to, funny, kind, everything Miranda had never been. I clinked my glass against hers. Sarah said after a moment. "Do you think you'll be able to trust someone again?" I considered the question carefully. "I think I learned something important," I said. I was so focused on being the perfect supportive husband that I ignored every red flag. I sacrificed my own dignity, my own needs, thinking that's what love meant. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly strong. I almost did, I admitted. But then I realized the best revenge is just living well. 2 weeks later, I got another call from an unknown number. This time I answered. It was Miranda's voice, small and broken. I waited silently. I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out. I'm so sorry. I was selfish and stupid and I threw away the best thing in my life. You were good to me and I didn't appreciate it until it was gone. I asked, my voice neutral. Because you deserved better, she said, crying now. And because I need you to know that I understand what I lost. Every day I wake up and realize how much I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be there, always supporting me, always catching me when I fell. Miranda, I said gently, I hope you find peace. I really do. But you and I are done. I know, she whispered. I just needed you to know that you weren't the problem. You were never the problem. After she hung up, I sat in my new apartment, a better place in a nicer neighborhood that I'd bought with my promotion money, and felt something settle inside me. Her apology didn't fix anything, didn't erase the pain. But it confirmed what I'd already come to understand. Walking away had been the right choice. 6 months after the divorce, I barely recognized my life. I'd been promoted again, now I was managing a whole department at work. I'd started going to the gym regularly, taken up hiking, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. My apartment was decorated exactly how I wanted it, with my gaming setup and book collection prominently displayed, things Miranda had always complained about. Sarah and I had grown closer, though we were taking things slow. There was no rush, no pressure, just genuine connection. One Saturday, my father visited my new place for the first time. You seem different, he said, looking around approvingly. I am, I said, realizing it was true. You know, he said carefully, I heard through the grapevine that Miranda is working as a cashier at a retail store now, living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates. I nodded, feeling nothing at the news, no satisfaction, no pity, just indifference. That's their journey, I said. My father smiled, the proud kind. That's the right attitude. You've come through this stronger, not bitter. That night, Sarah came over for dinner. I'd been learning to cook, another hobby I'd neglected. We ate pasta I'd made from scratch, drank wine, and laughed about nothing in particular. Sarah said as we sat on my balcony, looking at the city lights. I'm glad you walked away from her, she said. Not just because it brought you into my life, but because you deserved to walk away. I took her hand, feeling grateful, not for how things ended, but for what I'd learned. I'd learned that love shouldn't diminish you, that sacrifice has limits, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply walk away. Miranda and Daniel had taught me what I didn't want. Now I was free to discover what I did. A year after the divorce, I ran into Daniel by accident. I was in a coffee shop near my office, ordering my usual, when I saw him standing in line behind me. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit right, looking tired and older than his 35 years. He saw me too, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he approached. Ethan, he said quietly. Daniel, I replied, my voice neutral. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to say something. I'm sorry. Truly, genuinely sorry. I studied his face, seeing real remorse there. Because I've lost everything, he said simply. My business, my reputation, my self-respect, and I deserved it. I nodded slowly. You're right. You did. I thought about it honestly. Maybe someday, I said. But we'll never be friends again. He nodded, accepting this. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're doing well. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd. I sat down with my coffee, feeling completely at peace. I'd gotten everything I needed, not revenge, not their suffering, but my life back. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Still on for tonight? I have a surprise for you. I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. As I left the coffee shop, I took one last look back at where Daniel had been standing. Then I turned away and walked into my future, leaving the past exactly where it belonged, behind me. I'd learned the hardest lesson of my life. Some people will take everything you offer and still want more. Some betrayals can't be forgiven or forgotten. But the most important thing I'd learned? Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full, so rich, so genuinely happy, that the people who hurt you become nothing more than a cautionary tale you occasionally remember on quiet nights. I was no longer the man who'd stood frozen in that doorway, watching his world collapse. I was someone new, someone stronger, wiser, more careful with my heart, but not closed off to love. Someone who knew his worth and wouldn't settle for less ever again. The old Ethan had died that day. The new one, he was just beginning to live.